This just in, President Joe Biden will be speaking to the nation tonight regarding today's Supreme Court ruling, a 6-3 decision that says Donald Trump has a lot of immunity from crimes he committed while in office. The nation's highest court decision is a major blow to prosecutors seeking to hold Donald Trump accountable for his attempts to overturn the 2020 election results. This, of course, fell along partisan lines. It has taken them 6 months to render this decision. And remember, Justice Sonia Sotomayor warned us about rulings that will be coming down. Well, now we have this. Joining me now is Elie Mystal, Justice Correspondent for The Nation. Also, Adam Serwer, staff writer with The Atlantic. Glad to have both of you here. Elie, I want to start with you. How bad is this? For folks who don't understand the law, who they don't follow this stuff closely, how bad is this decision?
Significantly worse than even I imagined it would be. The crux here is that the president cannot be charged with the crime for acts he commits while he's in the White House. Now, you're going to hear a lot of people, a lot of apologists for the Supreme Court, a lot of centrist Republican style people telling you that, whoa, they're unofficial acts that he could still be charged for. Yeah, but the key here is that the Supreme Court gave no guidance on the difference between official and unofficial acts. Arguably, everything the president does is going to be ruled as an official act. More importantly, the Supreme Court took away the ability to use evidence of what the president says and does as evidence against the president trying to say that his acts were in fact unofficial. Because if the president talks to the public or talks to his advisors about, for instance, who he would like to assassinate, that communication is also official and thus can't be used to prosecute the president. So there's really no more bounds on what the president can do. It's elevated the office of the presidency to a situation where it is truly above the law. The president now has the ability to commit crimes. And again, I'll end there because that's one of the most important legal points. We're not talking about qualified immunity. We're not talking about immunity from civil liability. We're talking about crimes. We're talking about absolute immunity to commit crimes as long as you say committing that crime is part of my job as president of the United States.
This is Justice Sotomayor. Anthony, go to my iPad. She says the court effectively creates a law-free zone around the president, upsetting the status quo that has existed since the founding. This new official acts immunity now lies about like a loaded weapon for any president that wishes to place his own interest, his own political survival, or his own financial gain above the interest of the nation. The president of the United States is the most powerful person in the country and possibly the world. When he uses his official powers in any way, under the majority's reasoning, he now will be insulated from criminal prosecution. Orders the Navy's SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival, immune. Organizes a military coup to hold onto power, immune. Take a bribe in exchange for a pardon, immune. Immune, immune, immune. Let the president violate the law. Let him exploit the trappings of his office or personal gain. Let him use his official power for evil ends, because if he knew that he may one day face liability for breaking the law, he might not be as bold and fearless as we would like him to be. That is the majority's message today. That right there sums it all up. This is literally saying this is like if you have a criminal informant and the FBI says you can commit any crime you want to because you're our informant. Don't worry about it. We're going to get you out of it. You're never going to get arrested. You're never going to even be prosecuted.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, there are no bounds around this ruling, which I think is the scariest part here, right? Like, you could have look, I thought Trump was going to win at least partially in this case. You could have constructed a ruling that said, well, there are some criminal acts that are clearly so against the nature of lawful proceeding, blah, 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 remanded it back down to the lower court for further review and instruction. The Supreme Court did none of that. The Supreme Court, Roberts, writing for the majority in the Supreme Court, did none of that. And he simply said that anything that is within his obvious constitutional powers, he has absolute immunity for. And anything largely, that could be arguably said to be an official use of power, well, he has presumptive immunity for that. That is an immunity that no other official in this country has, not a cop, not a meter maid, not a congressperson. only the president is allowed to commit crime and never, ever be prosecuted for it. He's the only person in the country that's now allowed to do that.
So the notion of equal justice under law, that just goes out of the window.
Well, I mean, if you look at the history of the United States, we could talk a lot about the history of the Constitution, the text of the Constitution, the framers' intent. But one thing we know that they deliberately were trying not to do was create a king. And here you have the Supreme Court's originalists, the people who supposedly care the most about the history of the Constitution and the framers' intent, saying, actually, if Donald Trump wants to be a king, he can be a king. And I think what we need to understand about this ruling is that we're talking about it in the context of Trump trials, him possibly being prosecuted for what he did in the past. But this is really a forward-looking ruling. It's a ruling that says when Donald Trump is president again, he is allowed to go on the crime spree that we, the justices, the conservative justices of the Supreme Court, want him to go on. We will not stand in his way. He can commit any crime he feels like committing because he is the president. That's what this ruling says.
I guess all of these comments here during confirmation hearings don't mean anything. Go to my iPad. Watch this.
I believe that no one is above the law under our system, and that includes the president. The president is fully bound by the law, the Constitution, and statutes. I believe that no one is above the law.
That, of course, is John Roberts. Here's Samuel Alito.
Is above the law. No person in this country, no matter how high or powerful, is above the law. It has been a particular honor for me to serve on the Court of Appeals for these past 15 years.
Now, that's Sam Alito. Now, guess what? Here is Brett Kavanaugh.
No one's above the law in the United States. That's a foundational principle that I've talked about, coming from Federalist 69, coming from the structure of the Constitution. We're all equal before the law in the United States of America.
Well, we know all three of them were lying because they comprise 3 of the 6, Elie.
And can I say, let me wrap together this opinion and the other opinions that we saw last week. When you look at the court's calling onto itself the power to rule over executive agencies, when you look at the court's decision in the Chevron case, and you link it up with today's case, what you have is the Supreme Court grabbing final authoritarian power over the rest of government, over both the presidency and Congress, right? Because the whole point of the Supreme Court not telling us what official acts and unofficial acts are, not explaining that difference to us, it means that only the Supreme Court knows. Only the Supreme Court can tell us which acts the president can never be prosecuted for and which acts he can be prosecuted for. So I hear a lot of liberals, a lot of left-leaning people out there today saying, oh, well, Joe Biden can now use this immunity. No, he can't. No, he can't. Because if Joe Biden tried to do the criminal things that Donald Trump did, all of a sudden the Supreme Court would say, oh, no, those were unofficial acts that Joe Biden took, whereas Donald Trump took official acts. See the difference? Because the Supreme Court is making up its own rules as it goes along, the Supreme Court is the only institution with real power in this country. And that is the through line from throughout the Supreme Court term, and certainly from the last week and a half. Only the Supreme Court has the power to tell Congress what it can and cannot do. Only the Supreme Court has the power to tell the EPA what regulations it can and cannot have. And now only the Supreme Court can decide what a president can and cannot do.
You know, Adam, Republicans love talking about progressive judges legislating from the bench. What we are seeing is, as Elie said, an absolute power grab by these conservatives, and they are essentially they are doing the bidding of these moneyed interests, these rich interests. You talk about the Chevron case. You talk about now, even if a rule has been enacted, decades ago, they can go back and now sue. I mean, the chaos. Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson talked about that. The chaos that we are about to see unleashed on this country, especially if Donald Trump wins, is going to be nothing that we've ever seen before.
I think we have to understand that this ruling and the level of power that the Supreme Court has asserted over the past few weeks, I think fundamentally changes the nature of our government. Whatever we were before those rulings, I think we're becoming something different now, and we will become something even more different if Donald Trump takes power after the November election. And I think fundamentally this is a 19th century worldview that the justices have, which is basically that elites really should not be held accountable for anything. There is a certain level of immunity that if you are a conservative elite, whether that's in business or in government, you simply are not bound by the law the way that other people are. And so I think it's important to go back to those statements that they said, well, nobody is above the law. They're actually creating classes of people who are above the law, and those people are all their political allies and friends.
Elie, what people have to understand, again, Sotomayor talked about, hopefully a president doesn't go there. Let's be real clear. Donald Trump has already went there. He knows no bottom. There's no such thing as guardrails. Justice John Roberts, in his opinion, literally said that because the president is pursuing his duties to uphold the law, he can inquire about investigations of the Department of Justice when we've operated as if there's sort of this wall between the executive branch and the DOJ so they can maintain their independence. Roberts has just said, oh, the hell with that. The president can call the attorney general, give me an update on this case, involving him, involving a family member, involving an administration official. That's what John Roberts is saying.
Yeah, he's obliterated the separation, the wall of separation that's supposed to exist between the president and the Justice Department. Democrats are well aware that Joe Biden does not call Merrick Garland up and tell Merrick Garland what to do. But that separation, that's out the window. If Trump gets back in, as he was already doing with Bill Barr and Jeff Sessions and the toilet bowl salesman man, whoever he puts in as Attorney General next, be it Stephen Miller or Mike Davis or some other kind of unreconstructed racist that Trump finds out of 1965 Alabama, it will be a situation where Trump can call that attorney general up every day and instruct him who to prosecute, who to let off. That's, again, the kind of massive power that the president has accrued to himself under this ruling. And to go back to Adam's point, when you talk about the class of elites that Adam is absolutely right that the Supreme Court is creating, let's also not forget the earlier decision last week where the Supreme Court made it okay for people to take bribes as long as they're called gratuities or tips after the fact. It's completely legal now for public officials to take bribes so they can get paid for a decision that helps out their powerful friends, just like this one today. It's a all hands on deck reformation and reimagining of what America is supposed to be. And that reimagining is not one in line with democratic self-government principles. And of course, that has always been the point of the conservative takeover of government and especially the courts. They don't want democratic self-government principles because they understand that they might lose in a democratic self-government, right? They might lose free and fair elections. They lose all the time. They don't have the kind of political and demographic advantage that allows them to forever keep whites' power in a democratic system. So now they've gone to the courts to impose that power as a form of minoritarian rule on the rest of us and make sure all of their friends are, again, above the law and unable to be held accountable by it.
I want to add something to what Elie just said. I mean, when you talk about when Roberts obliterated DOJ independence with that sentence saying the president is allowed to have conversations about investigation, that is the president. Donald Trump is right now saying he's going to pursue retribution against his political enemies. So with Donald Trump going on the campaign trail saying, I'm your revenge, I'm your retribution, all that stuff, John Roberts, having seen that, decided to write into this decision, oh, and by the way, when Donald Trump becomes president again, he can prosecute whoever he wants, and he can decide that other people, his friends and cronies who commit crimes, those people will not be prosecuted. He can decide that those people will not be prosecuted. So it's really sort of a frightening window into what the Supreme Court thinks about both itself and about Donald Trump, which is that they want their guy to be president, and when he is president, to be unbound by the law or the Constitution in any sense, except to the extent that they decide they don't like something he's doing, which is to say that they're in charge now.
And Elie, let's be clear. This decision today, this was not specific to the case that came up. They decided, and we saw this in their questions, they basically pushed aside the actual case that was in front of them, and they decided to create a standard for the future that had nothing to do with the case that was presented to them.
John Roberts went out of his way to avoid talking about the actions of January 6th, to avoid talking about what actually went down and the crimes that Donald Trump was actually accused of. It was actually only Amy Coney Barrett in a concurrence, in a footnote of a concurrence, that even brought up the fake electors. John Roberts, in the majority opinion, he stayed far away from the crimes that Trump was actually charged with. Now, again, constitutionally speaking, the Supreme Court is not supposed to issue advisory opinions. They're not law professors, right? They're not supposed to pontificate on what the law could be in some day, right? They're supposed to deal with, quote, cases and controversies, actual things that are happening. But this decision was completely removed, completely detethered from any actual wrestling with what Trump was charged on. And again, as Adam is saying, this is all by design. And if there's one thing that I want your viewers to come away with from Roland, is that nothing is happening by accident. Right? Nothing is happening because the justices are just trying their best and they ended up in this place. Like, this is all part of a plan, and that plan is being executed. And that plan is to make sure that whatever we do this November, it doesn't matter. Like, that's the actual plan. And so when you have people, and I hate to go back to this conversation, but when you have people kind of pulling their hair out over the fact that Biden looked old and slow at the debate, and I agree, he looked old and slow at the debate, do you understand what's coming next? Do you understand what happens next? If you think Trump was willing to commit crimes the last time, what is he going to do now that he knows for a locked fact that they're not allowed to prosecute him after he leaves office? There's just, you have to have some perspective about the forces that we're dealing with here.
Adam, go ahead.
If he leaves office, the Supreme Court has said he can't be prosecuted if he refuses to leave office, because, that might be part of his official duties. So really, that's what Sonia Sotomayor said in her dissenting opinion, that this is so broad that it essentially legalizes, someone deciding they want to be president for life. There is no universe in which that is what was intended by the founders. There's just no universe in which that's what they wanted to do when they devised a system of checks and balances. Whatever else you might say about them as wealthy slave owners who created a constitution that recognized property in man, they did not intend to say you can be president for life if you feel like it.
President Biden is going to speak on this 7:45 p.m. Eastern. And I got both of you here. I got to get your take on this. Go to my iPad. Listen, you've got Elie, you got people like James Carville and other Democrats who are yelling and screaming, oh, my God, Biden has to be replaced. These people are sitting here trying to float other candidates. They want to ignore Vice President Kamala Harris. And the bottom line is this here. I just think fundamentally this has to you have to accept the reality. It was an awful night. He had a bad night. But this notion that you could just go ahead and replace Biden right now and everything is just wonderful and it's going to be all okay is crazy. This ruling right here, this should be the rallying cry of Democrats. This ruling right here and the Chevron decision and the other decisions should be, I don't give a damn who the hell we put up. It has to, there's no way in hell Donald Trump can be allowed to be anywhere near the Oval Office because the Supreme Court is going to allow this man to do whatever he wants. And we know how evil he is and what he is going to do to wreck this country because he has no bottom.
Expanding the court, adding justices to the Supreme Court is the only way to stop the Supreme Court. You can't legislate yourself out of it. You can't legislate with a restoring Roe legislation or a presidents are not immune from crimes legislation, because the Supreme Court will strike that down as unconstitutional. So you can't legislate your way out of it. You can't vote your way out of it because the Supreme Court isn't voted on. The only way to stop the Supreme Court is to add justices to the Supreme Court, and Biden Biden has been against adding justices to the Supreme Court for his entire career, including all throughout the run-up to the 2020 election. He has also been against getting rid of the Senate filibuster, which is the kind of proximate cause of why progressive policies and agendas and things like packing the Supreme Court can't be done. If he comes out tonight in the heat of all of these rulings against not just the liberal agenda, but the Democratic agenda, small d, the agenda for democracy, if he doesn't come out against the Supreme Court tonight and say that something must be done to bring these people to heel, then I don't know when he is going to come to it. That is the only solution. In terms of replacing him on the ticket, I'll go to the law here because that's my expertise. If you want to replace Biden on the ticket, the literal only person who can replace him on the ticket is Kamala Harris. I don't say that because I like Kamala and I'm black, although I do like Kamala and I'm black. I say that.
Yeah, we know you black with that Afro pick. We know you black, but go ahead.
I say that because the people who gave them money gave the money to Biden Harris, not Biden or whatever other white guy you guys come up with, right? So if Biden is not going to be the nominee, all of the money and the spending and the ad buys that have been done on behalf of the Biden-Harris campaign go to Kamala Harris. So if you don't like Biden, then your choice is Harris. And if you don't like Biden or Harris, then I guess your choice is fascism. But those are your choices. Those are the sum totals of your option. Biden, Harris, fascism. Pick one and join me in November.
Adam, you don't have a pick, Afro pick with you today, but go ahead.
Unfortunately, I no longer have an afro to pick, although I did have nice hair when I was, 18 years old before it started falling out. But, I mean, obviously he's right. I think the trouble is that if you say that Joe Biden has to step down because he's not, he can't campaign, then I think he really has to resign because there's no way that he can campaign, but he can discharge the office of the presidency. And I'm not saying, he has to resign. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying if he chooses not to run, there's no logic that says he can stay in office to do that job, but he's just not up to running a campaign. Now, obviously, the offices of the presidency is much more difficult and much more complicated. But he's right. The only alternative is Harris. It's either Biden or Harris. Those are your choices. So people have to figure that out.
All right, then. Elie, Mystal, Adam, Serwer, gentlemen, I appreciate y'all joining us today on the Black Star Network. Thanks a lot.
Love being on with you two brothers.
Time to get paid, blow up like
Fanbase exclusive audio rooms are here. Now tap, talk, and get paid. Monetize your live podcast and most engaging conversations. You can now create exclusive audio chat rooms only for your subscribers and biggest fans. And as a user, subscribe, listen, and talk to your favorite creators. Now tap, talk, and get paid. Because everyone's a fan of something, and everyone has a fan base.
I'm blowing up like you thought I, and if you don't know